Is that saying in Chinese? It's like I don't know exactly what it means, but it is used as a similar to I don't think it means but it's like people saying or like or actually we call them a stop word is what we call it. I don't know what the English term for it is. Like a filler word? Like a pause word? I don't know what you guys call it in English. It means that. Oh, there you go. But it's similar to when we say yeah. Although that's a really bad habit to have. Like and bad words to have. I think that is the I was trying for a long time looking for it, but I think that is the only positive thing or compliment that I could give to Steven Crowder is that when he talks in like full sentences and keep going. He never ums. I don't think he uses like. He just keeps talking and constructs his sentences very well, purposeful. Even though everything says is batshit crazy and guy's a fucking retard, but that he does very well when it comes to just speaking and being clear and not having it be cluttered with ums and stuff like that. That makes it sound a lot better than it actually is. If you're very suggestible, there you go. Eloquent? No, not eloquent at all. Not articulate either. He just is very good at avoiding those filler words. And he probably had to practice that for a lot. I assume, this is a weird assumption now, but I think often people who do that very, very well were probably people who had either speech impediments or stutters or stuff in general, stuff like that when they were younger. And they had to specifically, we have logopedist, I don't know what the term is for, but you basically go to like speech class so that you actively get rid of that. And by doing that, you actually get ahead of other people who don't have the speech class because they don't get extra help and extra emphasis with that. And you end up, if you're just enough to need the speech class, you can actually surpass in those, there we go, in those qualities or in those skills, you can actually surpass people who didn't have any initial problems or not enough to need it. And as a result, end up on top just because of the extra help you got. New emote. Uh-oh, here we go. Salute. Okay. Or took ESL classes? I don't know if that would help you stopping filler words. For me, it just slipped in because of streaming for so long stretches, and for many days. But I noticed that it is really bad. I think it's just too much because in the past, when I used to sometimes at least edit some of my own stuff, all of the ums I wanted to cut them out because they were so annoying, but it was so much extra work cutting all of them out. It's just so much editing into that. And it would make more sense to try to be doing a conscious effort to get rid of them instead, like I'm doing right now. But it takes a lot of extra energy to constantly be thinking very strongly about what is the next thing I want to say, where is this sentence going. Even though we've been speaking English for so long, it is very easy to just give in, let your mind wander a little bit and start, it's very easy to start doing that. I had to learn how to utilize pauses in my public speaking in class. Oh, yeah, sometimes people think they need to just ramble on, right? Definitely a good class, though, despite how intimidating it was. Oh, that's another one. When people are talking, they'll end every single sentence with right. And another one that I've noticed that I find a bit more annoying, but it's to fill time, is that people will start questions with, so let me just ask you this, right? And then they ask the question. why not just ask the fucking question? Why do you have to use an introductory sentence for your question? Just fucking answer. You're trying to drag on what they're what they're trying to say. Or they start every sentence with, the thing is this. But then Americans tend to say, for some reason, tend to say, the thing is this. Even though you only do double is's when you say, what the thing is that, then you have to double is. But if you say the thing is, you just say your thing. Or the point is, and then you say your thing. You don't have to double is there. Which sounds like you're trying to make it more important than it actually is, but then you fucking make a grammar mistake, so then you undermine the whole thing. It's a little unfortunate. I know, right? There it actually works. It's like the word like, a lot of times it's used as a filler word, but you can say, that's like that time that this happened. Then like is not a filler word. You're using like as in similar to, that reminds me of. But when people say literally like, that is the worst, because literally means exactly the same. Like means similar to. But then you say literally like, those are direct contrary words. They can never be should never be right next to each other. Then you're just literally like, right, like, literally, yeah, like, and then nothing happened. 8 words exited your face, but no information was conveyed. It's okay, to be quiet if you have nothing to say. That's totally fine. Sometimes it made me more aware about how I end sentences or notice redundant, repetitive words, phrases. Oh, that's one. I don't know if you guys notice at all, but maybe you'll start hearing it now that I mention it. But one redundancy that I have started noticing more and more is, well, I would say that more and more. Instead of people saying over and over, they'll say over and over and over and over and over. Just try to exaggerate, but over and over already covers all of that, right? Or you say etc. Some people say etc. That's also fucking cringe. But like you say etc. That covers everything. You don't have to say etc. 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 Right? Like that's insanely redundant. But the thing I wanted to mention is, what I noticed is people saying, they use multiple ways of saying the same thing, right? The redundancy, literally, for also. They say, also, I've had this thing as well. It's like, well, you had this thing as well? Or also you had this? Or you noticed this thing as well, you noticed this thing also, but not also as well, right? That's like the same thing twice. It's like a double up. That's a redundancy. I still feel like we need an English word for what we have in Dutch, which is called a contamination. When you have two sayings and you smash those together and you end up with some deformed fucking hybrid abomination of a saying that is just completely wrong. Because I was scrolling through YouTube Shorts yesterday, and there were some statements there. Like, these guys were going out, and they were asking. This guy was asking a woman, would you be okay giving up your right to vote if it meant you had to get enlisted in the army? And I was like, what is this question? Would you give up your right to vote? And in order to do that, you had to go into the army? Who would ever say yes to that? That feels like a double negative, right? And then the person said yes. And I was like, how is this person understanding what the guy is actually asking? There's no shot. This question... But apparently what he meant, afterwards he explains it, is that in the past, being in the army was one of the few things, apparently, even though it was like debunked, but his point that he was trying to make, which was wrong, was that you had to be in the army, or that was one of the very strict few things you could do in the past to earn the right to vote. But somehow the question he asked was, would you be okay giving up your right to vote if it meant you had to go into the army? And I was like, your question is just not even remotely asking what you're trying to ask. But somehow the person understood it. And I was like, how is that even... That will keep in motion that horrible fucking... And there was another one as well. Oh, someone... They were interviewing people, and then, you have some interview series on Shorts and on TikTok and whatever the fuck, and then 40 million other people do it, right? So you have this person saying and then they give these some outrageous amount of money for $100. Like, what is And this is what the guy said. You guys tell me if you think there's anything wrong with this sentence or how you understand this sentence, okay? Or how you think it should be understood, but how, okay. The person said, so they interviewed a kid and their parent next to it, and they said, "What is a lie you've never told your parents?" Most people look in the deep in the exact meaning of words spoken. Yeah, which is problematic because you get so much confusion, especially once you start adopting like ESL and ETL people into your language. You get people who learn the basics of the language and how to understand it, and then they get into communication with people, and it's super confusing because not just because it's not using exactly like you learn in class or something, but people just generally have no idea what a fucking apostrophe is, for example. And then you write something, and based on how you write it, it could mean something else. But then you're supposed to just context guess now instead of. My issue is the sender of the message making it the recipient's problem whether they understand it or not. When I think that onus is mostly on the sender of the message to make sure that the person hearing it can understand it properly and that you are doing the best you can to get it across. But what seems to be is laziness of the sending of the message and just making it the problem of the receiver. And then if the receiver hears it the way that you actually sent it, but not the way that they can maybe infer that you probably may have meant it, then it's suddenly their fault and they're the problematic ones, right? I don't like that vibe. So he asked, like, what is the lie that you've never told your parents? What would the answer be to that? You just make any kind of lie up on the spot and you just tell them that. Because that would be a lie and it would be something that you have never told your parents before. And that would answer his question. What he actually meant to ask was, what is something that you've lied to your parents about? Or what is something, a secret that you've kept from your parents that you never told them? That was his actual question. But what his question was just doesn't ask that. But every single person he interviewed interpreted it how he meant it. But why is it the person who's hearing it, or like, or another one? I fucking hate this one. Like, tell me this without telling me this. It's like, no, you can't tell without telling. It's fucking impossible. You can say, tell me this without saying that, right? You can tell me that in meaning. You can convey this meaning to me without specifically saying the words. You can do that, but you can't tell without telling because tell is the same fucking word, right? You just can't do that. But now that's like the meme to use that. And now a whole generation of people is hearing adults and older people saying that, and it's like, oh, I guess that's how we do it. And now it just gets more confusing. You have so many cool words, you know? You can use new words, but why use existing words for things that you already have other words for and just make it more confusing? Ugh. Sometimes more about the pragmatic effect of the speech act than actual semantic content of it. Perfectly valid way of speaking, just a dialect difference usual. No, well, I talk about this a lot, but I love dialects and I love accents, and I think they're amazing. But I think you should be able to, whatever dialect you're speaking and whatever accent you have, I think you should always strive towards, aside from that, always strive towards having like the standard language knowledge as well, and have it be aside from each other, and not having be this like fucking blurb messed together when you don't actually know which one is which anymore. Just for professional settings, for, you know, teaching your progeny, for stuff like that, because dialects will get diluted as well if you mesh them up with like the official language, and then the dialects will eventually get lost, which I think is also a major loss. So I would actually like to keep the dialects more by keeping them separate, you know. I think it sucks and it's not good when beautiful dialects die out. They should get the respect they deserve, and then the base language should get the respect it deserves to help people communicate in a clear way. Because I have a bunch of neighbors from a lot of different countries. Like one Romanian, one Ukrainian. There's a guy from Senegal. He doesn't live there anymore now, and his Polish wife, and Turkish, a few Turkish people, and it was the Polish lady was talking. Well, Polish neighbor was talking to me about it, and I say lady. She was like 4 years younger than me, but Like she went to classes and stuff to learn the language, and then you learn the fucking language, and then you try to talk to people who only speak dialect, or they speak like this garbled dialect main language hybrid, and she just couldn't understand what the fuck they were saying, because they weren't able to just say like, oh, I mean this word that you probably learned. They weren't able to speak to her as someone who was just learning the language. They would only know their own dialect words for it. I don't think that's good. That's not how you include someone in your language, I don't think. If you want to include them, you'd be like, oh, you probably learned this word. We use this other word, and that kind of means the same thing. Maybe this one nuance difference between the two. And I think that's beautiful. Yeah, and I think you understand the intent. Of course, I understand the intent, right? That's why I'm able to correct them. If I wouldn't understand the intent, I wouldn't be able to correct why what they said was wrong, or why what they said isn't actually asking what they're trying to ask, right? Otherwise, I would just be taking it at face value, right? But just because you know the intent, I think doesn't mean you should think it's okay, right? If you're like a teacher in a school and someone writes the wrong answer, but you kind of know what they meant, and you know that they kind of understand where the question was going, you still can't give them full marks. You can give them partial credit, but you can't give them full marks, right? Because it's not technically correct. It's basically the same thing. Yeah, ESL is. I think ESL is also European StarCraft League. I think. I used to watch it on Twitch a lot, but typically that stands for English second language. Yeah. Love conversation like this, masters in linguistics. I love talking about it a lot, but I know that a lot of people think it's like pedantic, right? A lot of people like just making a lot of grammar mistakes and talking bullshit and not having anyone correct them. And because there's a large enough group of that, then you have this whole group of people who's just like faking it until you make it. Just seeing adults spell "its" with an apostrophe when it means possessive of it, that just I just feel like there's just so many years of education that just went completely wrong. I read into that hardcore. Or people who just put an apostrophe in front of an S whenever any word ends in an S. Like that's just then just stop using apostrophes altogether. Just don't worry about them anymore. Just let them all go then, because you obviously just have no idea what the fuck they are or where they where they go or what their purposes are. It's fine. Then just abandon them completely. But just don't pretend like, oh, this might have an apostrophe. Let me just slam them in everywhere randomly when there's an S at the end of a word. Like the. Yeah, no, I say ETL for third language, but typically just means not your native language. Yeah, not your mother tongue or native language. Yeah, that's. With Mr. Scardor, my grammar is of. Honestly, is of you could have, because is of is. If you sound it out, it almost could sound correct. That's a scary one. Please don't use that one, because we'll see, like the could of. Oh, you see something like, oh, I could have got that, and it's like, no, it's could have gotten. Oh my god, it's like it's not even. You're getting so far from the original sentence that at some point there are more mistakes in the grammar than there are words in the sentence, and at that point, I feel like we've got to just pull it back just a little bit, Like I'm all about like slang and letting the teenagers develop their own language and all of that, but we need to lock. You've got the dog on the leash, and you're giving it a little bit of space, but you're not just letting go of the leash and letting it run into traffic. They gotta just a bit of guidance. But it's is meant for it is it not? Or it has. It's a shortened form of it is or it has. Yeah. Or technically, it could also refer to multiple instances of the word it. Like if I say it, I can say that sentence has a lot of its in it, and then you would also use an apostrophe for it. Because there, if you wouldn't put an apostrophe, it would look like it's like possessive of it, and then you would have you wouldn't know which one of the words you're using, so you would have to use an apostrophe to clarify the differentiation between it. It's like letter A, like is like, oh, that word has a lot of A's in it. If you wanted to spell that, you'd have to spell A apostrophe S. Even though A usually is plural form, a plural form usually doesn't have an apostrophe. But if you would write A as, then you have the word as, and then suddenly it gets you start confusing it with the word as. So there you'd have to use an apostrophe instead. But I personally would do as I would use capitalized A and then an S. I think you can then attach it to it. Because then it's clear that you're emphasizing that A as the letter A, because you certainly have a capital letter in the middle of a sentence, but I'm pretty sure you should actually do lowercase a apostrophe s for that. I could have get them right. Who was that was arguing could of during stream? Wasn't really arguing, but it basically came down to the same thing as like, oh, you know what I mean. And it's like, yeah, I do know what you mean, but I'd rather have you, correct that rather than putting that pressure of just understanding the correct thing and actually reading what you're supposed to write rather than writing what you're supposed to write. I'd rather you write what you're supposed to write rather than making it someone else's business and have someone else work harder to understand what you're saying, But yeah, that'll always be the problem. Is as long as you have enough people who think in the same way of like, oh, I should just be able to say whatever, and you get what I mean, then suddenly that becomes the norm to just let people do whatever the fuck. And then if someone pushes back against it, then suddenly they're the weird one, whereas you're the weird one for making it someone else's problem, right? But like that, yeah, all of the what's the word I'm looking for? Responsibility, accountability is then gone, and suddenly that's put on the other person, and now the other person has to do the work. Yeah. I do believe though that if you type it like that a lot, then it's probably faster to type because you actually develop muscle memory to smash it out like that, right? But if that's the case, I feel like you should be able to take a step back and like, damn, I've been saying it wrong for so easily and so normally that even without autocorrect, like that's how I'm used to typing it. That must mean I really need to rein that in. That would be my response. But someone else would be like, well, fuck it. People understand. Who does this version of the song? It's the dude from the because Jonathan Young. Yeah. It's the same guy from the Pokemon song, the metal version of the Pokemon song. You're of what? Apparently, also, what I've seen a lot is it's very tricky for whether it's two with one O or with two O's. But I've noticed more and more that there are things that are not actually homonyms. No, not homonyms. Homophones. Not actually homophones. That get treated as being homophones because of lack of enunciation. And I think that's just something that you can, again, knowing the difference, whether you're on a doing a dialect or like a regional thing, or you're speaking like the proper language, that would help context guess properly what word it is. Because two with one O and with two O's, you would say, I would love to. But you would say, I would love that too. Like one is shorter and one is longer. Or it's like then and then. Like those are different vowels. You should never have a problem writing either then or then. It comes from people just saying then for both. Or this one I cannot fucking understand. But some people will write he's for his. And it's like, bro, those vowels are even less similar than then and then, right? Like his and he's. And also one has an apostrophe and the other one doesn't. Like the only reason I can think of that those get confused is a complete lack of anyone in a position of education giving a fuck, and the other one is just complete lack of enunciation. That's the only way that can happen, I think, and long-term exposure to that as well. I just won the hardest Settlers 4 game ever. Nice. Was it a long fight? 45 minutes of not attacking. And then ultimately it just comes down to laziness, right? Just not caring on a certain level. And I know I care way more than people do, than a lot of people do. Yeah. Also, I want to say, this might be wrong, but I want to say, instead of I care more than a lot of people do, I want to say I care more than a lot of people does. Because a lot is one lot of people, so one lot does care, not one lot do care. But I know a lot is colloquially definitely used and similar to like the word many. But I feel like if you want to say many, then just say many. Like many people do. But I think a lot of something does. Like there is a lot of coffee, not there are a lot of coffee, right? Whether you take a lot of accountable or not accountable unit, it should still be one. Because the word a, what is it? A or the, what is the name for those kind of words? Fuck. That is, the word a should always be able to be replaced with the word one. Like a lot of people should be one lot of people. But I think it depends as well if people say a lot or a lot. If you say a lot, then it's clear that you're trying to replace it with the one, right? Where you say a lot, then you just mean many. But I feel like you should say many. I ran with 150 soldiers to his base at 1 hour. I won the fight but couldn't finish him, so the game dragged on to an hour and 48. Jesus. Came back multiple times. Those are the good feelings to win, though. Nice. Because you will say, and I think this is a big difference though with British English, because Brits will say, oh god, they will use companies, countries, and like sports teams. They will refer to those as plural. So if the sports team of English of England is winning, they will say England are winning. But then you have people say like Nintendo are doing this. I was like, no, Nintendo are not doing anything. Nintendo is one company. Nintendo is doing something. Nintendo decides to do something. Like that is what they're doing, not that are what they are doing, right? But that is how. Again, I'm going to just keep saying things, and then you tell me if you have heard these things or if you're going to hear them in the next week, okay? How many people will say those type of things? How can it be those type? A type is one thing. It's that type of thing or those things, but not those type of thing. Like, that doesn't... That's incongruent, right? You have singular plural incongruency there. And then some people will say those types of things, but then they describe one type of thing. A type is already a grouping of several things that have a similarity. But then they'll say those types, but they mean three things that all have one type in common. And it's like you're grouping them together so you can talk about things more succinctly, right? And just make easier statements on all of these things without having to mention all of them. But then you point to them incorrectly, which makes it more confusing. When you're trying to make it simpler, you're actually making it more complex. That's also a weird concept that I've been noticing more and more. Have an installation of Windows on my computers. We have like one version of the OS on multiple computers. At a certain point, people just give up on trying. Yeah, I know, but I feel like if you give up on trying and someone else is trying to clarify or trying to help you out, you could just be like, yeah, either like I appreciate the effort, but I don't care. But be like, you're wrong. That's like another thing. It's like, no, the other person is not wrong. The best part is when I correct someone's spelling or someone's grammar, and then someone else tells me that it's incorrect, and it's like, dude, if I went through the trouble to like help to do this thing and to help out, if there wasn't even a doubt in my mind, you know that I double checked to make sure, right, that it's an actual correction. And if you see someone else getting corrected, the first thing I would always do is double check if that's actually true. But then people will go like, oh no, that's not correct. It's like, why would you even say that? If you're going through the trouble to type it, at least double check your information first. Like, you're just not correct. But you care enough to tell someone they're wrong, but not enough to check if they're if you're actually right in that correction. That doesn't track with me. Many type, yeah, yeah. They would say like those type of things. Say that, but you can say those and then type because type is singular, those is multiple, plural. Sorry, so that doesn't track. Those, oh yeah, that sort of thing. That's another one. I think you can use both. You can say that sort of thing, or you can say that sort of things. Another one is when you're talking about that group of people over there is protesting, right? Or you can say that group of people over there that are protesting. You could technically say both in that sentence because you can say that group of people that are protesting, right? And then that's what you're grouping. Or you can say that group of people over there is protesting. One thing is that the protesting is the thing that makes them a group, and the other thing is the fact that they're all over there and protesting. One is the fact that they're people that are protesting that makes them a group, and the other one is the fact that they're a group of people over there. The thing that they came there to do is protest in a group, right? It depends on if they went there as a group for that purpose or they all ended up in there and they ended up doing the same thing and that makes them a group. But what you can't do is say that group over there are protesting or something. You can't say that because that group is one thing. That group is protesting. Right? But then the confusion with like the teams and stuff in Britain when they're saying like Britain are winning, it gets pretty, or like Nintendo are deciding to do this, or when you get that couple, right? Like you will say there a couple of things are wrong with that. No, a couple of things is wrong with that. There's one couple of things wrong with that, right? A couple is two things. You can say there are two things wrong with it, or you could say there is a couple of things wrong with that, right? But it sounds weird because you've heard it probably 1,000 of times the other way around. But would you say there is a couple over there, or you'd say there are a couple over there? Then you would always say is a couple over there because it's people, and then you know it's definitely two, right? So are we using couple wrong? Yeah, because you probably mean to say several. Several things are wrong with that. That's what you mean. You don't mean exactly two things, right? So you're just using the wrong word, but then you're using it using the wrong word for the thing that you want to say correctly, and then you end up with the wrong association there. Because again, one couple of things, a couple of things, one couple of things is wrong. Because it's a is replaceable by one, right? Yeah, it just comes down to what level you care, because essentially, again, if most people understand what you're saying, but it's very easy for language to then evolve very quickly for all the people who are in the in group, and then that's how you get, I think, that's how you get people who've lived in the country where you are for like 20 to 25 years and they never really bothered to learn the language because they probably tried a little bit in the beginning and it was just too much and they just kind of give up on it and they get by with their minimums. And that's how you'd never, some people are stay foreigners in the country that they live in their entire life, partially culturally as well, because they never really tend to get in there. They never seem to integrate, because the people in the country are also not doing any kind of effort to kind of meet them where they're at. And I think that's unfortunate to have people stay marginalized that way and kind of get marginalized just by the form of how language gets used. But, you know. I had to build 100 thieves because the rules were saboteurs at 90 minutes. The games seem to have really weird rules. I don't think I could ever play the game with that, all of that stuff in mind. I don't double check shit. I just wait for you to double check me. Well, that's also laziness on your side, okay? That's like me trying to double check your homework, double check your essays. Group of people over there. Oh yeah, that's another one. Like there with ERE and there with EIR, I think are perfect homonyms. I believe. I don't see how you could say those differently. But there is different, right? You have THEY apostrophe RE is there because the word is they and then RE. It's not because they and then you put RE, then it suddenly becomes there. It's there, right? So that's also not a homonym. So that shouldn't be part of those three things that get misspelled. There and there, those first two are the same. But there is different. If you enunciate it properly, that should never join that group. Just like then and then. And then the big confusing thing for me is knowing that like 50% of Maplers are all Asian and speak some other Asian language, which are all or mostly tonal, how people then make those mistakes in English when they learn an entire, way more complicated tonal language on the side, but somehow then and then is where they fold over. That's interesting to me, how that happens. Is for sure proper grammar? It's for sure. It's for sure proper grammar. I think so. For sure is just, it means definitely or something. It's just a confirming statement, I think, right? Or certainly. Another one that's wrong, for example, is our famous. Hang on. Where am I? Hang on. Our famous T1, where he says built different. That's completely wrong. It's built differently, right? Epsilably? Epsilably. Tell me you play too much MapleStory without saying you play too much MapleStory. Epsilably? Oh, wait a minute. Oh, restart. Hang on. Start with some Turkish. You're right. Am I right? Oh yeah. Well, mirrored camera. Sorry. Or the human right that I possess. Right. Buff Scardussy. What? I mean, just make me feel a certain way if somebody says like that masters in linguistics doesn't really like go in on me about how everything I say is like completely fucking bullshit and very, very stupid. So vindicated slightly, unless they're already gone, of course. Is Tech 9 one of them? Yeah. Actually, this is the Greek freak in chat. Come on, Greek, link your SoundCloud, bro. Time to plug. Worldwide choppers. Oh, look at that! Look at Protomane with the apostrophe S correction. Oh, love to see it.